And have her talk
I'd
about
just
the
like to do a little
restrooms.
bit of housekeeping announcements for those of you who haven't been here. Our restrooms are located behind our reception desk. If you go out the store right over here and down the hall, you'll find them. And hopefully you were all able to get signed up for the Metropolis parking system that we have. If not, we'll gladly be able to help you. You just need your car license plate number and some payment information, but we will validate for the full amount. Thank you all for being here.
And don't we also provide some sort of transit passes for people when they take transit to our office?
Yeah.
And so if you would like a transit pass, then let us know as well. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd ask you if you could, before we get started, if we can just secure our our phones as we go through this process. Thank you. And hey, welcome to the Regional Growth Committee, the Wasatch Regional Council. I hope you all had a great New Year's holiday, Christmas holiday. Certainly it's been great around my house and the northern part of the state. The only thing we're missing, if it's worth anything to you, is we just anticipated more snow. And we can certainly use a little more snow, I think. So we'll let the weather forecasters figure that part out. But welcome to the Regional Growth Committee. Today is Thursday, January 16th of 2025. And the time now, I believe, I'm going to call it 9:20. So we'll call it for 9:20. We will start with introductions, both around the table and those who are attending online. And so we will begin. Always like to begin on my right, if you don't mind. So if you just introduce yourself and kind of give us an idea of where you're from. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Jordan Chandler, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Sarah Lawless, WFRC Analytics.
Sheree Wood, Mayor of South Salt Lake.
Dina Blaze, I'm with Salt Lake County, but representing the Utah Association of Counties.
Allison Stroud, Sandy City Council.
Brandon Stanger, Clinton City Mayor.
Tamara Tran, Kaysville City Mayor.
Andrea Pearson, WFRC staff.
Andrew Gruber, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Thank you. Bob Dandoy, Roy City and Chairman of the Regional Growth Committee.
Good morning. Ted Knowlton, Deputy Director here at WFRC.
I am Lorene Kamalu, a Davis County Commissioner, but on this board representing the Utah Association of Counties.
Beth Holbrook, Utah Transit Authority trustee, representing Davis, Weber, and Box Elder. Just wanted to add some fun this morning.
Hi, Laura Hanson, Senior Advisor to Governor Cox for Long Range Planning.
Nicole Bordeaux, UTA.
Brad D., Commissioner, UDOT.
I think Meg, if you would.
Meg Pageon, CED Director, WFRC.
Jory Johnner, Long Range Planning Director, WFRC.
Miranda Jones Cox, Government Affairs at WFRC.
Roger Borganick, Utahns for Better Transportation.
Paul Larson, Brigham City Community and Economic Development.
Tim Watkins, WFRC.
James Gueda, WFRC Long Range Planning.
Chrissy Dahlberg, WFRC.
Byron Head, WFRC.
Chandler Butler, UTA Government Relations.
Steve Schaefermeyer, Director of Planning, South Jordan.
Ellie Spencer, WFRC.
Okay, let me read off some names of the people who are online with us, and then we can just have them just to make comment, if you would. Let's see, we got Ari, Carlton, and Julie. Let's start with Ari.
Ari Bruning, Envision Utah.
Carlton Christensen with the Utah Transit Authority and on my way.
Julie Bjornstad, Senior Transportation Planner at the Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Perfect. Okay. If we could have Mayor Ramsey and then Russ.
Sorry, I'm reaching for the mute button to unmute. This is Dawn Ramsey, South Jordan City Mayor. Happy to be here and grateful to join electronically.
Russ Fox, Director of Planning with Utah Transit Authority.
Okay, I think we've got everybody. There may obviously be more people rolling in a little later, and that'd be perfect. Thank
Mayor,
you.
excuse me, Mayor. May I, Mayor Palmer, joined us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Mayor Palmer and Harriman.
And also, Mr. Chair, I'm noting we have several people that we have, who are members of the committee that we have asked to accept the invitation to be promoted as panelists that is in process. And so I just, if I might, note that we've got Mayor Zoltansky, Mayor Fippen, Ivan Marrero from FHWA, Kevin Cromar from the Air Quality Board, and several other attendees online.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. Okay. Well, again, welcome. We appreciate you joining us today. We do have one action item at this moment, okay, which is the minutes to the Regional Growth Committee held on October 10th in 2024. Is there any comments or questions or amendments to that particular set of minutes? Okay. Hearing none, then I would like to have a motion then to approve the minutes for October 10th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Perfect. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Lauren, thank you. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those disapprove say nay. Hearing none, then the minutes are approved for October 10th, 2024. At this particular point, we do have public comment period. If you would like to make comments during this particular time of the meeting, please do so. All we ask is just give us your name and the organization you represent. Public comment period, anything? Nothing online? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'd like to move to item number 3. It's information talking about the status update of the Wasatch Choice. This year, the Wasatch Front Regional Council will develop a draft preferred scenario for how transportation and growth shall unfold from now until 2055. That scenario is the foundation for the Wasatch Choice Vision that was adopted in 2020. It will be adopted in 2027. Today, we're going to unpack how the preferred scenario was developed. This will include a discussion of how the Wasatch Choice workshops feedback was defined and redefined and analyzed. We're going to introduce, or at least Ted is going to introduce this particular topic in this meeting. So Ted?
Mayor, thanks a lot. Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to be with you this morning. Before we get into this question of the development of this preferred scenario, this picture, if you will, of where we are headed from now out to the year 2055, I wanted to start with a little thumbnail sketch of the overall process of updating the Wasatch Choice Vision, which includes the Regional Transportation Plan. Sarah, can you go to the next slide?
But you mentioned the picture. Just go back for 1 second. I would just like to note one thing. I see myself in this picture, and I noticed 2 things. One, I appear to only have one outfit. And 2, if Mayor Silvestrini were here, he's not a member of this committee. I just want to clarify that I'm not looking at him angrily. I'm listening intently. Thank you very much for the record.
That's the intent face, yes.
Okay.
I've been meaning to ask you about those clothing options, Andrew.
So back to our regularly scheduled program. The process of updating our shared Wasatch Choice Vision and Regional Transportation Plan, it's a 4-year process. And so in the last year, 2024, more or less, a little bit will happen here in 2025. We explored our future. So we explored ideas to test and vet for this preferred scenario. In this year, then we focus on refining those ideas, packaging them into one preferred scenario. Next year, we focus on how do we prioritize this for action over time. And then in 2027, RGC would then in turn make a recommendation to council for adoption. Now, you are the, if you will, the steering committee for the Wasatch Choice Vision, but I wanted to just give you that lay of the land before we focus in this agenda item on step 2, our preferred scenario. And so, Sarah, go to the next slide. But when we think about this, explore our future, again, there's kind of 2 major components to it. There's what is our desired land use framework, and what are transportation ideas we want to explore. That's really what happened in 2024 together. Go to the next slide if you would. So in this agenda item, we're going to focus on 2 aspects. One is engagement and buy-in. How do we take the ideas from 2024 and see which ones really resonate, vet them that way? That's with local government, that's with transportation agencies, that's with broad stakeholders. That process is expansive. That is informed and interrelated with, so how do these ideas perform? How do they advance our quality of life as defined by the WFRC Council and the 10 goals of the Wasatch Choice Vision? So we're going to talk about those 2 things, and would love your thoughts and ideas and guidance on both of those. But we'll start with the engagement and buy-in. So in the workshops, how many of you had a chance to go to one of these workshops, one or more of these workshops? I love these workshops. It's the chance for, if you think about a community, it's the mayor, it's the council, some or much of the council, planning commission, key staff, and communities near them, and county officials, state elected officials. It's such a neat opportunity for a group to take a step back and say, where do we want to go in the future? And so we got a lot of ideas generated in these workshops. It wasn't just, though, from scratch. It was, let's take a look at the existing plan, let's affirm and modify and put in new ideas, all of the above, again, land use and transportation. So we have this, maybe the wrong word, but we have this fodder. We have this information, then it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of ideas. How do we take that and then go to a preferred scenario? And on the engagement, more on the engagement side, this is a little bit of the roadmap, and would love, after I go through this, would love questions or comments on it if you have any. So we finished the workshops and other outreach. That includes outreach to the broader public and in individual stakeholder meetings. We're in the middle of that. Then we take that and we send that to, let's focus on the land use side. So you see those 2 icons. The map icon means land use, and the car and the bus, that means transportation. So we got land use and transportation ideas in the workshops. We're going to send the land use ideas back to local staff, city and county and town officials, for them to kind of help us refine that. But we want to make sure, then this is back to the draft to city stakeholders, that all of those city stakeholders, council, planning commission, have a chance to review that feedback, even if they didn't make it to the workshops. That's actually something that that we're focusing a bit more on in this cycle, is let's make sure that we circle back to stakeholders, not just city stakeholders, but this is also transportation agencies and the like. So we do that. That's on the land use side. Now we're working through transportation all through the year, and I'll get back to transportation. So our plan then is in spring of 2025, this is the 4th box, if you will, spring of 2025, to then say, look, we've heard from the communities, this is the land use they want to work towards. By the way, a lot of that'll be consistent with their general plans, but the Wasatch Choice Vision extends beyond most general plans, and so there may be ideas in it that are beyond the general plan. But let's set that and lock that in place, that this is the desired aspiration for land use. And then that enables us to test transportation ideas more meaningfully. Does that make sense? So where people live and work is a function of where, let me back up, how people want to travel, even the mode that they pick is affected by where the homes and jobs are, and the form of those homes and jobs. So it really is such this critical component of kind of testing individual transportation ideas. So we have to kind of lock that down a little bit. So we test that, and that's part of that whole technical process of understanding how do these perform. We do that in the summer of 2025, and then we go back in a round of workshops in the fall of 2025 that's focused more on the transportation side of the preferred scenario. So I'll pause, and that didn't come out as clear as I'd hoped, but let me know if you have questions or suggestions on that process.
Well, let me just make a comment, okay? Because I think it adds to your point. When we attend these workshops, we certainly have our neighbors. So if there's an organization, much like cities within the county meet, we talk, we look at issues, but typically they're kind of framed, if you will, within that county. Royce City sits on the border of Davis County and Clinton. And because we basically on that border, it's hard for us because we have no meetings. We don't have that collaboration that takes place. It simply says, what's going to happen a few yards on the other side of that border? There's no mechanism in the process except this mechanism. So when Royce City starts to make a plan that says we're going to now move, okay, and we're going to do these kind of things, it needs to be compatible with what in fact is happening on the side of the border, okay, that typically we never talk to them about. When we make decisions about trails or we make decisions, we don't have those open communication lines. And yet this particular workshop forum provides that. I get to see what Clinton is thinking. And I get to then marry, in essence, with Roy, what Roy is thinking. And so there is that collaboration, that uniformity that exists with it. It doesn't happen anywhere else. And if you can do that between counties and cities, think what you're doing now, in my opinion, what these workshops are doing across the entire Wasatch Front. Now, I can't say this, but Commissioner, if you're representing then the counties, and remember, Wasatch Front Regional Council only addresses that portion that's north or Salt Lake and north, then hopefully these same conversations are happening for our friends and neighbors in Utah County. Because what we do and how we do it together is incredibly important. And I'm telling you, this is the only forum that I have found in all my elected experience that gives me an opportunity to see that connectivity, to make plans that are as important to us as it is to my neighbor. So I find incredible value. I have attended every one of these. And I do that in large part because I get to see the bigger picture. And there is no other mechanism that allows me that opportunity. So Ted, I'm telling you, I get excited. My comment.
And Chair, I'd like to add the tiniest bit to that. I have learned in my time as an elected official that the most complex challenges that we face are only solved and improved and hopefully get to the best possible place they can get with tremendous collaboration. Top down doesn't do it. Being in a silo doesn't do it. You have to bring all of the stakeholders and start at the ground level.
I'm sorry, I just could not resist. Thank you so much for your comment, because even as I started in this role, you were very supportive of helping UTA to navigate what at the time was difficulties or challenges in talking about how we manage real estate around our rail system. And by actually working together to really create a more cohesive strategy, it has really evolved significantly. I mean, 2022 was the station area planning and the discussion about approaching, and that again is that collaborative piece that you're talking about. And as you know, at UTA, we have representation on all of our regions, including Utah County, although served by a different MPO. I know there's a very symbiotic relationship, and I know that communities down in Utah County are also looking at these land use challenges that we have. And so I just really wanted to commend you for your dedication to that, because we have had countless conversations, and I very much appreciate how much and how engaged you are individually, but also collectively. This is a growth strategy discussion, and it does take all of our partners to navigate this well. So thank you.
Ted, go ahead and continue. Thank you.
As the steering committee to this effort, so RGC, we'll bring interim pieces to you. So you'll get that package of the changes to land use that that the local communities support. That'll come to you before that land use component is firmed up to then feed into the preferred scenario, as an example. So throughout this process, you will be, that information will come to you for review and guidance. Wanted to make that clear. Okay, so let's go to the other part of this. So preferred scenario, engagement, and technical analysis. And so if you go to the next slide, we've talked as, one more. We've talked as a committee a lot about, we used the phrase aspirational transportation concepts. We've gotten specific ideas around the committee. We've gotten process ideas. And I'm going to hand the baton here to Andrew. We've worked with you all, with transportation partners, to then sort of map out, okay, so how do we, what's the process, and technical and otherwise, to work through the exploratory transportation concepts that we're getting. Andrew, let me hand it to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ted. And again, good morning, everybody. Those of you that participated in our last Regional Growth Committee meeting may remember that we had a really good and extended conversation about how, as an organization and as a community, we strike the right balance between being aspirational about our transportation investments and our growth, but then also being pragmatic. And I just want to, what I'm going to do today, I want to remind you a little bit of that conversation, and then tell you, sort of as Ted noted, since the last Regional Growth Committee meeting, what has happened in the work to figure out how to strike that appropriate balance. This is for context. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jory, and Jory is going to actually run through with you some of the detail about the process that we're aiming to employ as we go forward to appropriately strike that balance, okay? So I'm just going to give you the context. As a reminder, the council, WFRC, and the Regional Growth Committee established a principle, several principles for the development of the updated version of the Wasatch Choice Vision, and then also the next version of the Regional Transportation Plan. And I'll just read this key one to you. Explore aspirational concepts for multimodal transportation choices for state and local roads, transit, and active transportation, balanced with pragmatic consideration of contexts and costs. And again, that balance is the key word. And you may remember in our last conversation, some of you said we absolutely need to be aspirational and be bold and think about the future. 9 years into the future as we look to the Olympics. What about the day after, sort of proverbially, the day after the Olympics? What is right for our communities? And even beyond that, 10, 20, 30 years out into the future for our children and our grandchildren, we have to be bold and make sure that we're taking hold of the future and shaping the communities that we want. And at the same time, sort of the easiest thing for us to do, us, WFRC, the transportation agencies generally, the cities and counties that do planning work, would be to just say, yes, put everything in the plan. Sure, let's do everything. But we also know that that's not reality, that we have to be pragmatic about what is feasible, in no small part what is feasible with regard to cost, right? Most of you are public officials, elected officials, and your constituents rely on you to be very prudent with the use of public dollars, with taxpayer dollars. We take that charge very seriously as well about striking that appropriate balance. And so we try to be really prudent and prioritize the projects that we assume that will be moved forward in the future, that things that go into our plans. And when I say we, I don't just mean WFRC, I mean UDOT, I mean UTA, I mean the counties and the cities and all of us working together. So, and I would note also that the plans that we have in place are already make assumptions about significant investment that's going to come. So the plans that you see on the wall and that we share all the time with Wasatch Choice Vision and the transportation plans already assume that there is going to be significant changes that you will steer in your communities around land use, developing the way that you feel like makes the most sense, city and town centers, additional housing choices, et cetera. They also assume really enormous investments in multimodal transportation. They already assume that. But we never stop there. We always like to think about what additionally can and should be done that would provide even better mobility and access to opportunities and clean air, et cetera, for our community, okay? So following that conversation that we had here, we also talked about it at Joint Policy Advisory Committee and in various other forums. We, and when I say we, I mean the transportation agencies collectively around the state, have settled into a modification to our processes, which are to add on what we're calling, and Ted said this already, a concept of exploratory transportation concepts, projects, and ideas. And part of this comes from a recognition that what we have done in the past is we always bring in ideas from all sorts of sources, and Jory will go through this somewhat, from all sorts of sources to add on to what's already being planned. And then we appropriately, I think, evaluate those projects and concepts with evaluation criteria, again, to make sure that the projects that end up in the official transportation plans are prudent and will perform well according to appropriate criteria, all right? And what we realized is that, you know, not everything can go into those official plans because we have those criteria that we are required to adhere to by law and that you want us to adhere to. And we were in some ways missing certain concepts that, again, you could call exploratory, that we might want to advance, but that don't meet those relatively tight criteria for being in the official plans. And so what we determined is it would be really helpful as a starting point to have a looser, I'm not sure looser is the best way to describe it, but a more flexible, let's say, set of criteria for projects and concepts to be considered in an exploratory layer, if you will, for transportation. That rather than a concept being brought forward and then just sort of being pushed aside and not ending up anywhere that people could see, that you could see, or that the public could see, that if there's projects that have been received some real consideration, they have some potential viability, but perhaps don't yet satisfy the criteria for inclusion in the official plans, that we would capture and reflect them in some way. And when I say reflect them, I mean literally in a map, in a list, okay? And then those projects and concepts would be able to be further considered as we go along. And if you and your communities, if your land use changes over time in a way that makes projects more viable, if funding sources emerge that we were not otherwise anticipating, that makes projects more viable or concepts more viable, we have the ability to pay attention to those exploratory concepts and then bring them into the official plans. And so this is us attempting to strike this balance, as we noted before, about being bold and then also about being pragmatic and being able to show you and show all of our communities all of the things that are already officially planned, if you will, and that there are things that could and perhaps in some cases should be done, but that we're not able to move forward on yet. So that's this notion of exploratory transportation concepts and projects that we're looking to incorporate into our processes going forward. Now, if you can believe it, that was the high-level, short, conceptual version. Ted talked about some of our processes, and I'm going to invite Jory. Where is Jory? Where's Jory? Oh, he's over there already. Jory, to come up to the mic, right, Ted? I'm going to Jory now. Okay, invite Jory to give you a little more of the substance on this. And I just want to, as I turn to Jory, I will assure you, even with what Jory presents to you on process and criteria, it is the high-level version, and there's a lot that goes into this work, okay? A lot of detail, a lot of analysis, planners, modelers, engineers, et cetera, data that goes into this work. And we have taken a more detailed version of this to your community staff, okay? The ones that the planners and the engineers, so that they can look at and review these in detail. And as always, if you want to dig into this personally, or your teams dig into this in more detail, ask us any questions now, and we'd be also would be happy to follow up with you or do separate briefings with you so that you can make sure that you feel comfortable with the approach that we're taking. Jory.
Perfect. Jory Johnner, Long Range Planning Director here at WFRC. Thanks, Ted and Andrew, for setting this up, prior information on the Wasatch Choice Vision and the exploratory transportation concept. So 10 minutes or so, plan to talk to you all about the Regional Transportation Plan process, or RTP, if you're not familiar. That way I don't have to keep saying Regional Transportation Plan throughout the presentation. So this graphic here is a high-level step-by-step process of how we will review and screen projects, transportation concepts or ideas for the upcoming RTP. As a reminder, you can access this flow chart and all the criteria in your RGC packet, as Andrew made mention, underneath the agenda item number 3. You can see it's broken into the 4 steps Ted discussed earlier: exploring our future, developing a preferred scenario, prioritizing projects, and then finally adopting the plan. And this happens over the next, over a 4-year period. This process is not much different than previous RTP processes. But this go around, we want to emphasize documenting why a project moved forward or didn't move forward. We want to make the lists of projects, all the concepts reviewed, more readily accessible to people to see, so that in 2 years you're wondering, hey, didn't I put a line down on a map? Where did that go? What happened to it? We want to make it as transparent as possible. And then, as you can see in the middle of the graphic that Andrew talked about there, we have a new exploratory concept, call it bucket or list. And we want to be able to show that. And so we're still working through the details so that you can maybe click that on when you're looking at the Wasatch Choice Vision map and see not only the regional transportation plan projects, but what other projects are still, viable or might need a few changes, things like that, as Andrew discussed. All right. So today, talk about 3 things. Concepts for consideration, projects, where they come from, preliminary screening criteria for each mode, and then a high-level overview of the technical criteria. As Andrew made mention, over the last few months, we've worked and brought the screening criteria for both of these to the Regional Growth Committee Technical Advisory Committee. So those are your planners. And then we've also met with UDOT and UTA planning staff to kind of review these criteria and help us make sure we're on the right pathway. We plan to utilize these pretty much starting this next month. throughout the summer. So we'll be evaluating all the projects and running them through the criteria. And then the intent is to bring before you a preferred scenario at the upcoming Wasatch Choice Vision workshop next fall, right? So we just finished a workshop. We're planning for the next one and what we want to bring you all to review. And just as a reminder, that preferred scenario is a system of projects needed by 2055 for all of the modes: road, transit, active transportation. And then, as usual, we're going to plan to work with the RGC Technical Advisory Committee, UDOT, and UTA throughout the next 9 months, as we filter through these projects, and expect a lot of follow-up. We had at least 60 maps from the workshops that we're pulling projects from. We have thousands of projects in our current regional transportation plan. So it's taken us a bit to get through that, but we'll start up and we'll have to do some dialogue with the local communities, DOT, UTA. Transportation concepts that we'll test come from multiple sources. As I made mention, they'll come from the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. So that's our existing adopted regional transportation plan. We just want to review the projects, make sure that they're still warranted, and there's a desire to move them forward into the next 2027 to 2055 Regional Transportation Plan. We're also testing different strategies here at WFRC with UDOT and UTA. So over the last year, we've created an entire network of bus rapid transit routes, a network of core bus routes. We've looked at a lot of local street connectivity over barriers, including like freeways, railroads, rivers, things like that. And then we're also working with UDOT on maybe a network of managed lanes. So either like HOT lanes or coordinated adaptive ramp metering, which was formerly known as managed motorways. We're looking at a lot of different corridors, and then on active transportation.
Can I do a super quick interjection? It reminds me, Mayor Stanger, of your comments in August about, hey, can we try things like reversible lanes and the like? And that's part of the way that we did a follow-up on that.
And then lastly, active transportation. I believe we've made it out to almost all of the local communities on the Beehive Bikeways effort. And UDOT is now making the rounds on the Utah Trails network. They've had a few workshops and a couple more coming up in the next few weeks. We've also taken, as I mentioned, comments from all of the workshops. So we're still getting through all of them. And then we want to make sure we capture any new projects from current environmental studies, existing transportation studies, transit fresh look, south part of Salt Lake County, northern Utah County. Want to make sure we're capturing those types of projects. And then we also met with universities, major landowners, and other transportation interested groups. We met with UBET, and we want to capture those ideas that we met with from these major stakeholders. And then we are in a public comment period. So we have a map out there. We've taken comment from the public. So quite a list of projects that we're looking at, but those are where concepts are coming from. And if anything pops up, or if you think of things, we're happy to test those throughout this process. So sooner the better, as always, but always open to taking new ideas. So next I want to discuss with you the preliminary screening. So this is like the first high level screening, and then I'll jump into technical the screening and criteria on the next slides. Remember, this is high level, as Andrew said. More detail is in your packets. We could have one-on-one conversations, but we could have a 2-hour meeting going into the weeds if we really dove in. So for roadway and transit, the preliminary screening, as Andrew made mention, is the really high, more flexible screening. We want to do kind of that first initial gut screening. And so most of these, the transit and road, will look at 6 different categories. Does the concept advance shared goals? So do they, community economic development, opening new markets, center viability, network connectivity, things like that. Does the concept have meaningful community support? Is it just one person's idea, or does it a shared idea across multiple communities? Does the concept have meaningful planning analysis of the concept? So we looked at it before. Does the concept have regional technical viability? This criteria is like more flexible. We're not going to be doing model runs at the preliminary screening. So, does it, do we assume that it might have better transit ridership, increased development intensity because it's tying to centers? And we might even look at adjustment of population and employment projections that would, as we work on our Wasatch Choice Vision Center update and the coordination of the transportation projects. Do we see any significant harmful community or environmental impacts, right? Do we have an idea that the new freeway across the community and it is going to remove hundreds of homes and businesses, right? And then lastly, does the concept have meaningful benefit to the system relative to potential cost? And so these are all high level. We're going to work really closely again with UDOT, UTA, with our technical advisory committee as we review these projects. And we're going to try to document everything. So like there's no surprises if something doesn't go forward. We can have a little bit of a paper trail, call it, right? For active transportation, the primary purpose of the preliminary screening for active transportation is to determine whether the project is of regional nature rather than local nature, right? So every community has an active transportation master plan. There's a lot of funding for active transportation coming, and there's a lot of desire for local type projects to make it into the regional transportation plan to qualify for future funding. And so we're trying to strike that balance between, is this more of a local project or is this more of a regional type project? And so that's kind of the intent of our initial screening on active transportation. So any questions on preliminary screening? Anything online? Okay. All right, so technical screening criteria varies by mode. You can see here on the screen. So let me try to cover these pretty quickly. But again, stop me if you have questions. So for roadway criteria, it's set up to review projects that would fit within the following categories. We look at capacity type improvements that would utilize our congestion management process, volume thresholds, and look at regional system expansions. For operational projects, we'd optimize existing facilities by making improvements such as adding turn lanes at intersections, median two-way turn lanes, access management, and kind of completion of a roadway, curb gutter, sidewalk. There's quite a few roads on the west side of our region that need some the complete roadway package. For safety, we'd utilize the new comprehensive safety action plan, the US RAP data. We'd look at grade separated crossings as an emphasis for roadways. Freight projects would look at the Utah National Highway Freight Networks, the Utah State Freight Plan, and connectivity to the Wasatch Choice Vision industrial centers. Corridor preservation is where we just identify any project that needs additional right-of-way. And then lastly, increase in network connectivity, including overcoming barriers, system connections on a smaller level within your communities, and then projects from the Reconnecting Communities program. For transit, three main focus categories. Does the project meet established ridership thresholds? We work really closely with UTA on this. Does the project provide access to opportunity, economic and educational opportunities? We'll review that closely. And then does the project have buy-in from the local communities and transportation partners? So that's a kind of an important component of the transit technical criteria for Carlton.
Jory, one of the criticisms we've received, and understandably so in the last few years, is are you preserving corridor for transit? And I mean, the reality is, especially in this region, the corridors are probably going to be limited to the same corridors as roads. And so somehow I would love to think in the corridor preservation in column A or on the roadway would also maybe include, a transportation component, because it would severely, it would enhance the viability of the project if we don't have to go back and secure corridor.
That's a great comment, and something that we've talked about internally at WFRC and with UTA about having some additional maybe categories for transit projects. And in a couple slides, I'll talk about multimodal coordination of how we look at projects, transit projects and roadway projects and how they overlap. Andrew?
I just note that it's a great point, Carlton. I agree. And corridor preservation funding is eligible to be used for transit as well. So that's another reason that we should make sure that we're thinking about that, which Jory said we are. So that's good.
All right.
Thanks so much. Just building on that same train of thought, there's a connection between active transportation and transit corridor preservation as well, thinking of the DNRG trail corridor, for example. So there's an opportunity there. And then one other just consideration, and I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, but for roadway transit and perhaps active transportation, is there benefit or value in evaluating whether one of these new projects would open up an area for economic development or stimulate economic development? Because I think sometimes transit projects may not meet the ridership criteria, but they're a more economic development focused, and recognizing that, okay, if it's not ridership focused, we may not get federal funds, but maybe it's a high priority for us locally because of the economic development opportunities that it might open up. So anyway.
I think so, and I would probably put that underneath the B for transit, the tied to the access ATO or the access to education. But we could take even a more detailed look at like not only like what's there now or what's projected, but would it open up
That's
a new
what
market?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the key, is more not, is it providing access to something that exists already, but could it open up an area for, future economic development opportunities? And I would think roadway would fall into the same category.
Okay, thank you.
Just a thought.
Actually, that dovetails on a thought, thanks, that I was asking, and maybe it's in the preliminary screening more so than in this, would be sort of weighting these criteria. It speaks to that. It's like what should, and maybe that's a local situational kind of awareness, weighting that would happen instead of just a standardized weighting to the criteria. I don't know if that has been discussed.
A lot of these criteria are yes, no's, or do they meet this threshold, or, either with ridership or with a volume. When we get to phasing, because this is looking at like, is the project needed by 2055? When we get to phasing, that's when we're comparing projects against each other, and we score projects based on 100 points, and we have weighting, and so that's kind of where the weighting will come in. But again, some of these criteria, again, in the details you'll see in the packet, will say needs to meet all of these things, or needs to meet one of the next 4 items, right? So there's not really a full way to weight these, because again, some of them are just yes, no's versus, how much delay they're relieving, or.
But Jory, to your point, and to
when they're
Dina's
needed.
question, you are through not necessarily through a weighting mechanism, but through other approaches, balancing and giving consideration to a variety of factors, sort of
Yes.
looking at the totality of concepts.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of these are yes to all, and some of them are needs to do 1 or 2 of the items. So I think that gives us a little bit of flexibility. Beth?
I really loved, Laura, I kind of knew where you were going, and then Dina kind of enhanced it as well. I do think that the potential for land use, which actually is part of, in some instances, you can look at an HTRZ as saying it's not really ridership driven so much as location area driven. And that, I think, is that land use piece that can really be utilized potentially, especially as we're looking at future growth. I really love the idea of doing that, because then what that also is talking about is how are our communities collectively looking at our region, and then what are individual cities doing, and how is that going to work, and what can the private sector bring to that table? A lot of times that's that economic development piece. And so I really like how you guys kind of framed that, both of you. But then I think adding all of this together, that really does, I think, enhance and help us to navigate in the future. So I love where that is going. So thanks.
And I think this part of our process, I think Nicole and then Ari, but this part of our process with that new exploratory concepts category, if we don't know for sure, or if there still needs to be a few conversations with local communities about adjusting land use or intensifying centers, things like that, that would support, in this case, a transit project, we can put them in the exploratory bucket and then reconsider them, because there's the loop around that we reconsider to go back into the plan. And so that does give us a little bit more flexibility, where in the past we've said, yes or no. Is it ready? Does it have the ridership? Can it move forward? No? Okay, well, it gets dropped, right? And then it kind of gets lost And in this case, there is that new category, and we'll have to see how some of these projects and the conversations go with the local communities on the land use. Nicole?
Oh, sorry, thank you. I forget about the mics. I speak so loudly without one, so sorry. Jerry, one of the things, and I don't know if this is something we look at on the other criteria, but a part of improved access to economic development and educational opportunities, talking about how we carry this across. I think one of the things that we could even look at on the aspirational or the exploratory projects is capacity. So transit builds capacity anywhere we put it. So I think that being part of our criteria, that's not necessarily ridership, but this goes to land use, economic development, access of opportunity. I think looking at what that transit project does for capacity of roads and active transportation should be one of the things that we look at that helps kind of that through line. So maybe we can talk about that offline, but I think looking at that would help pull these through. And sorry, Ted, you probably have an answer to that, but I love looking at that. If we could, I think it hits to what everybody's looking at a little bit.
Now I didn't have a direct response to that, but I wanted to follow up on Dina's great comment. This is your role, right? Your role as a regional growth committee is to advise us. And I'm just highlighting, Jory already said it, but there's two phases of, there's two steps in the technical evaluation. There's this that's more sort of screening level, and then there's a much more detailed evaluation, which is also part of refinement of projects. And so honestly, part of what we're thinking as well is we don't want to create a really complicated screening stage. We'd like to focus our efforts, weighting included, on that second stage. We really would love to get your guidance on weighting and the like. I just wanted to provide that sort of, there's an overhead question of like how much complexity within a screening stage. I hope that's helpful.
Ari?
Yeah, just to pick up on this thread of the impact of the transportation on the land use, just a few additional thoughts there. One is that there's a feedback loop back to transportation. So you may have an improvement that increases economic development in an area, and that may be an area that's a bedroom community, and increasing the jobs housing balance or improving the jobs housing balance in that area will then have benefits for the entire network beyond just that one improvement that you're adding. And another thought on the impact on the land use is, I've had this thought a lot with transit. You kind of have a chicken and an egg problem often, where in order to get the land use that generates ridership, you need the transit. And in order to get the transit that creates that land use, you need the ridership. And it's very difficult. I think it's something we need to wrestle with and think through. And there may be cases where you have an area where the market just isn't going to build TOD level densities in the hopes that transit will be there in 20 years, you know? And so thinking through that, what does that improvement do to the land use, I think is a really important piece of this.
Well, I think the work that our community economic development group's doing with the station area plans helps significantly with the planning around these stations. But yeah, I agree. It's chicken and egg. And then if the land use doesn't happen, then what happens, right? So like, we've got to be careful a little bit, like, you know, with that. I've got a couple, Andrew, anything else?
Good, real quick, just to Ari, this is such an important point that Ari is making. And it makes me think about the Transit Fresh Look work that we're doing collectively, Southwest Salt Lake County, Northwest Utah County. And the challenge in part is, again, about funding. Like we were talking about before, Mayor Palmer's nodding because he knows, Mayor Ramsey knows this. The federal criteria for the funding of transit projects is different now than it used to be, in that it principally looks at existing transit ridership in an area and say, oh, we can build on that, literally and figuratively. Whereas before, it was more about the opportunity for transit ridership. And so now, if you don't have transit already in an area, or to your point, it's harder to get it funded. And this is the tough conversations that we're having around, well, are there other sources of funding? What do we even put into the plans, to Jory's point, if the land use isn't there yet and the funding is challenging? what goes into the plans? How do we make sure that if we want this to happen collectively, we recognize it? Is it exploratory and we keep working on it? These are the kind of the dynamics that are at play that you're getting at. Okay, Jory.
All right. Last category here, active transportation. We're going to look at, is it part of the Beehive Bikeways and the Utah Trail Network, right? They're kind of shoe-ins because there's been a lot of work going on with both of those. Does the project overcome major barriers such as interstates, waterways, railroads, serves a major destination not otherwise served by a regional active transportation? Does it improve safety, features of an existing facility? And finally, does it have community transportation partner, landowner support with minimal impacts to sensitive land? So any questions on the active transportation? If not, move on to the next slide. Maybe. Yep. Okay. So after we complete the technical evaluation screening, we want to do a review of how the projects interact with each other, right? So as you can imagine, each of these seem pretty siloed, right? You have the roadway, you have the transit, you have the active transportation. We're evaluating criteria, they're different. It's really hard to evaluate a transit project versus a road project. We've tried in the past. I think we did it when Salt Lake County first adopted their third quarter sales tax, and it's interesting. It's a really difficult process, but things we want to ask ourselves after we get through the technical evaluation, we have call it our first cut of projects, do the projects complement or support each other? So if you have projects along a corridor, are they supportive of each other? Do they conflict with another project in that corridor, right? Is it limited right away that there's no way you can squeeze everything into? So we might have to make some decisions on which project moves forward. Do we need to adjust any projects based on, kind of how they're interacting with each other, how they tie to each other? And know that there's going to be multiple iterations of how projects relate to each other. This is the first main one that we'll really look at how they correlate with each other. When we get into phasing and the timing of projects, that's also important because it's a lot easier to build the active transportation project with the road project when it's getting built. It's beneficial to the transit project to make sure that any active transportation feeding into the stations is timed at the same time, doesn't come 20 years later, right? That people can actually now access the station. When we build a new West Davis corridor, you need to make sure the arterial roadway component are tying to that freeway. So we'll look at a lot of interactions within the projects, but this was kind of one of the first ones. So any high level or thoughts on how we look at projects and how they interact, Carlton?
Let me get to Carlton, if you don't mind. Professor Ewing, I think you wanted to make a comment, then we'll ask Carlton if he'd go ahead and make his comment. Professor? Is he still with us?
Here you go. Yeah, hi, thank you. What I have been thinking a lot about is the fact that our transit improvements, the S line, for example, which we analyzed for UTA and UDOT, and found that it had generated a lot of economic development, about $2 billion worth of economic development, but not much in the way of ridership. Of course, it's a streetcar, so it wouldn't. 400 South we also evaluated, and it's not all those mid-rise buildings you see, apartment buildings you see as you drive along 400 South or walk along 400 South, not generating a lot of ridership. And the reason is the housing isn't affordable for the most transit-dependent groups, the low and very low income. And where does your planning process account for housing affordability. I'm thinking that that is the Achilles heel of all this development we're generating with transit. It just doesn't produce enough affordable housing. And how do you address that in your plan?
Ed?
Reed, it's a big question, and I think that, you know, the Wasatch Choice Vision, it doesn't work out a detailed game plan to address housing affordability in all of the ways that need to be done. And by the way, we are going to talk about housing and the state housing plan a little bit more in a little bit. So then what does Wasatch Choice do that relates to housing affordability? You know, framework. This is a framework level for land use. And so we're talking about housing types that tend to be related to affordability, and where can they occur? Where might they be allowed to occur that they also can take advantage of lower cost forms of transportation? So we're paying attention to housing plus transportation costs, but in this kind of framework, the Wasatch Choice framework, it's a lot about the type of housing and where that housing occurs, and not so much. We can't forecast or really get into the detailed tactics of ensuring that housing is affordable, other than working again on that housing type and location kind of side of it.
Okay. Carlton, you had a question. Thank you.
Maybe two quick comments. One, and I have to give Mayor Palmer credit for this, because it was really his interest that kind of initiated the Fresh Look process. And the one thing I've sort of realized afterwards, and I even thought about to my city council days, so often when you go from step 2 to 3, we don't ever really go back and reinform like a council or something about what's actually in the plan, what's being recommended. So there's this surprise factor down the road about, oh, you mean that comment I made, you know, a year and a half ago, you know, it didn't get implemented, or, you know, what happened to that? So somehow I think how we reinform that process would be helpful. The second piece is, it's related, but you know, we're doing some new local service in April of 25, and we spent a morning literally driving a 40-foot bus around, testing out roads, refining what the route of that road was, and you know, had to come to the harsh realization that part of that route just couldn't happen because you can't maneuver a 40-foot bus on certain roads because of their lane. And the most profound thing that one of the things that came at the end is that Harriman staff, as we got off the bus, said, look, we're annexing hundreds of acres. Could you help us think about what our arterial roads look like? And because really, if you think about how local service eventually feeds this regional service that goes in the RTP plans, then where you have those arterial roads, how they configure, those are 30 to 50-year decisions that you can't undo. And I realize it's not in the RTP plan, but if there was a way to tie in a local transit plan to help inform that, that would also tell you the viability of some of these aspirational ideas and how well they could do. And I think somehow that would be, I realize you're not going to get it probably on this round, but it would be nice to figure that out, or at least give communities the opportunity to take that step and sort of inform the regional plan about where they think that system should
I wouldn't,
go.
Carlton, thanks. Mr. Chair, I wouldn't go so far as to say that that's not going to be incorporated. I think that weaving of the local into the regional is something that we do, and it can be challenging, but it's something that we always do, and we need to continue working to enhance that. So can I, Mr. Chair, may I call a modest audible? The state housing plan was referenced, and I know that Laura isn't going to be able to stay very much longer with us. And Laura, you were going to take a moment later when we talk legislatively about state housing plan. And now that we've talked about it a little bit, do you want to just jump in now and share whatever you would like to share?
Sure.
please?
And I'm so sorry for having to sneak out early and change the agenda. Sorry, Jory, for the small diversion here. We are working on a state housing plan, and it's a very collaborative process so far. We've got a whole bunch of stakeholders, and as you can imagine, anything housing related has strong feelings from lots of different stakeholder perspectives. And so it's been an interesting process so far. We have broken it up into 2 phases. The first phase is really focusing on all the things that we can agree on. So we have some high level goals. We have some guiding principles of how we're going to work together. We've tried to define what success looks like, identify some measures that we would want to track, some metrics to help us evaluate our progress. And then this first phase has included this great big inventory of all of the housing support structures that we have in place in the state. So funding sources, policies that are in place already, and organizations that are out doing work in the housing space. And then also we've done a big literature review and compiled a list of 200 plus specific tactics that could be employed to address our housing crisis. Those could be policy changes, they could be things to put money towards, they could be education or other types of initiatives. And so phase 2 will hone in on where we have possible consensus around some of those, and then we'll screen them similar to a process like this. We're screening all of these tactics by their potential impact, their potential feasibility, and then kind of level of possible consensus. So that's kind of where we're headed with housing. I will note one other thing. The governor just released with his inauguration his second term strategic plan for the next 4 years, which includes building 40,000 new housing units within centers identified in regional visions like Wasatch Choice. And so that's a really nice hook to the work that we're all doing here. And then if I could take just one last minute, I was listening to a fascinating podcast about the fires that are happening
Laura,
in California.
before you go to your podcast, just note also in that governor's strategic plan, which many of us have had the opportunity to provide comment into, it sets completing the strategic double tracking
Correct.
a
Yes.
front runner.
Yep.
Well before the Olympics. It notes making advancements on the Transportation Safety and Reliability Index that UDOT and the commission developed. So there's a lot of alignment in what we're doing locally, regionally, and with the state efforts.
Yes. Thank you for.
Yeah, alignment. Beth likes alignment, as do we. Thank you.
Yeah, that document's called Built Here. So if you Google that, you should be able to find it. And then the last thing in the podcast, I was listening about these California fires, and it was talking about, how we design our communities in the future when we're going to see more intense situations like this. And a takeaway that I got from it was building in centers like we've identified in the Wasatch Choice Vision. Those are areas that are easier to protect. And so as a region, that's something that we might want to be thinking about, as well as where we put new development and how complementary this vision is with that. So
California is the #1 state in the nation for housing development in the WUI, the wildland urban interface. #2 state, Utah. Right. So I think the development patterns, as Laura's noting, paying attention to that is really, really important as we go forward.
Great comment. Thank you. Ray, go ahead.
Carlton, 30 seconds. Address your comment. We're going to review the projects, as I made mention, over the next 9 months. Work with your staff closely, do some follow-up, the Regional Growth Technical Advisory Committee. With the idea, again, bringing this preferred scenario to the workshops this fall. So as usual, we'll bring things to the Regional Growth Committee before we bring it out to everybody else. On another note, as you know, on that slide, we're going to start working this summer on reviewing and revamping the project phasing criteria, and we'll bring that to you all for your input and thoughts later this summer into the fall as well, with the thought that as soon as we can lock down the preferred scenario after the workshops, get your comments, we'll dive right in 2026 to identifying when our project's needed. If you at any time are wondering what happened to your comments or where a project stands, reach out to us. Fortunately, nowadays, almost everything's on our shared drive, right? So it's easily, we can shoot a spreadsheet, we can send documents if you want to review. And if future agenda items, make a recommendation to Ted of being like, hey, it would be good to get an update on where we're at. Where did we end up with this? Can we get a 15-minute overview of, how things are going? Or we can just proactively do that, Ted, would be good. But we do want to make sure, as Meg mentioned earlier in the presentation, the RGC is our main board that reviews the regional transportation and the Wasatch Choice Vision process. And you guys should be up to speed as anybody else, really. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jory. Appreciate that. Great information. Any comments, questions before we move to item number 4? Okay, thank you. Item number 4 deals with stationary planning certification for South Jordan track stations. We will now consider certification requests for stationaries in South Jordan in accordance with the stationary plan, components of the state law and the RFC, the Wasatch Regional Council policy. We have a representative from South Jordan to include Mayor Ramsey. And I'm not sure if Mayor is actually in the state, but if she's online, that's perfect. We'll go ahead and start with that. We asked Megan if she'd go ahead and lead the conversation. Thanks, Megan.
Mayor and Mr. Chair, as Megan's coming up, I just want to note and welcome other members that have joined us. Professor Ewing, as we noted, Tiffany Pocock from UDOT, Julie Fulmer, Mayor Vineyard, Kendall Thomas, Tooele County Council Member, Sharon Bolos, Weber County Commissioner, and I think that covers everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to be here in front of you in 2025, a big year for station area planning. We have 4 station area stations, 1 station area plan covering 4 stations to consider for certification today. I'll talk a little bit about just reminders what station area plan is, where it came from, what's required, and then we'll talk about the South Jordan Tracks stations. Okay, so station area planning is something we've been engaged in since 2022, and really before then, lots of your cities, including South Jordan, have been thinking about transit-oriented development around their stations for a long time. In 2022, HB 462 required that all cities with a transit station or within half a mile of a track station do a station area plan for that station. The goal, it came out of a housing bill, right? It came out of initiative to increase housing around our most accessible transportation networks, and that very much includes our rail and bus rapid transportation networks. The goals of the station area planning effort are to increase the availability and affordability of housing, to promote sustainable environmental conditions, to enhance access to opportunities, and to increase transportation choices and connections. So all of the plans are local, they reflect local desires and goals, and they also address these 4 goals at least. Station area plans are required to have 5 key components. That is a vision, a map showing that half-mile buffer around a track station or a quarter-mile buffer around a bus rapid transit station. They have to have an implementation plan. What is the city and city partners going to do in the next 5 years to implement that plan to the best of their abilities? A statement describing how those 4 objectives I mentioned are met, and then public and stakeholder engagement is required. We have technical assistance. So we've been assisting all of the cities that are engaged in this effort throughout our region with technical assistance money that came out of a partnership with GOEO and UTA, and we're sharing that funding source with the Mountain Land Association of Governments. So we spent over half of that money. Cities are wasting no time getting moving on this, and all of those cities with stations are engaged in this technical assistance. Here's a little bit of a report on how it's going. We show you this progress tracker each time we meet on one of these. We have 127 station areas. That's because lots of the stations are divided across multiple communities. About 29 of those have been certified so far. We're considering 4 more today. So that number could jump to 33 certified. And the rest are somewhere along the process, 53 of them actively being prepared. And then some of those stations have either prior planning that's happened, or they might be facing more challenges and kind of working out how they might be able to get certified. Some of them are just a little sliver, and we're making sure to talk to those communities. We've funded 25 applications with the Station Area Plan Technical Assistance that's partnered with GOYA. Okay, so the 4 that we're considering today are in South Jordan. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction and then turn to Mayor Ramsey and Stephen Schaefer-Meyer here from South Jordan to talk about this more. They know this better than anyone. This is a really great example of why this has to be locally driven. Not all station area plans are the same, and really no two are alike. South Jordan has been transit-oriented development planning for years and years around the Daybreak area. There's a new station coming online, which gives them a little bit of an accelerated deadline. And in meeting with the city of South Jordan, we said, let's do a plan that's more of a synthesis of plans, because there's lots of plans in place. This map that you're seeing is a land ownership map, and there's not very many colors. Most of this is Larry H. Miller. It's in the Daybreak area. There's some University of Utah land. And really that's about it. There's a little pink parcel called the Last Holdout. But most of this area, there's lots of partnerships in place. There's an HTRZ that's been approved here. There's a master development agreement at Daybreak, right? So we synthesize these plans, we engage those stakeholders again, and prepared a station area plan. There's, I believe, about 27,000 residents intended to be in this area. Really massive growth in population, as well as 11,000 housing units planned. So this is a booming area within our region. I'm going to turn it to Mayor Ramsey. Mayor Ramsey, would you like to make any comment on the station area plan for the track stations?
Much. My friends, I can see all of you. I am not turning on my camera for you to see me. I'm taking just a little bit of personal time today to attend a family wedding. So I'm on my way as a passenger to the Draper Temple right now, which is why I can't be with you downtown. I appreciate being able to join you electronically. Meg, thanks for introducing this. This is a unique area because this station area plan is not aspirational. It's not something we're looking down the road at wanting to create. This is something that's literally already coming up out of the ground, and a lot of work has been done for quite some time. As most of you know, South Jordan's Daybreak community has been in development for more than 20 years. The master development agreement was signed back in 2003, and the first track station in our area, the Daybreak Parkway Station, opened in August of 2011. We've had so much growth in this area, and it keeps happening fast. And, Meg kind of listed some of the stats about how many folks will call just this specific area home. It's a lot. And we're working really closely with our development partners on this new urban center that will bring an urban center with amenities and opportunities and affordable housing and transit, all to an area that's been mostly suburban up to this point, and a place where we don't have enough of these kind of things. And we're grown up now, and it's time for us to bring some of these things. And so this station area plan will reflect some of that, and reflects a lot of the great work that's already been taking place as we've been planning. It was mentioned that we do have a housing transit reinvestment zone on this. And also in 2016, a special tax assessment was done to support the construction of additional public infrastructure. So there's been a lot of visioning exercises, a lot of economic analysis, a lot of market studies and planning and engineering and code updates. So much vision and collaboration has gone into this area that this 4-part station area plan just seems to be make the most sense for how to do this. And we are proud of what's happening here, and hope that this will meet all of the required criteria. We're confident that it does for a station area plan. I'm going to ask Stephen Schaefer-Meyer with South Jordan City. Stephen is our director of our planning department, and he's brilliant. He can answer all the hard technical questions. So I'm going to invite Stephen up and ask if he will take over. And thank you all for your efforts, for your work this morning, for the good conversations, and for your consideration of South Jordan's track station area plan.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're talking over 1,000 acres. Some of it is already built. We have all housing types. We have the University of Utah, which has a large land holding. We've got some sensitive areas that we're working with different partners, including Salt Lake County for a regional trail on Bingham Creek. We're working with UDOT right now to figure out what Mountain View looks like, how we connect across. There's something called a cycle track that connects the entire community through it's not for serious cyclists per se, it's for families, it's for individuals who can comfortably ride their bikes through the area. And we're working on how do we get across the freeway. So there's a lot that's going on here. When we had our consultants come on, we said, how do we get you all of what's already been done, what's currently in process? So you can actually go on our website and it's in our code section, and you can find all the master plans and agreements that are just in this area, not even for all of Daybreak. For years, we've seen, if you've been out to Daybreak, go out to Daybreak again. I have to drive out there sometimes to believe the massive growth that's happening. With entitlements in place, our partners, the Larry H. Miller Company now, has a lot of flexibility to build when and where they would like. And so we have worked hard through the HTRZ, special assessment districts, various tools and partnerships to make sure growth has happened. At some point, there was sort of a leapfrogging of this area with the prior ownership, and we have homes now going as far as Bacchus Highway, U111. But we are so grateful that now we're focusing on this downtown area, this urban core. So I thought it would be interesting, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but I thought it would be interesting to show you how quickly a community can change. So this is really just a very small section of this station area plan that we're showing you. And this is from Larry H. Miller's Downtown Daybreak website. And of course, we like to call this South Jordan's downtown urban core. And so we're grateful for the investment that they're bringing in themselves. They're currently building phase 1. You can see that on the map. It's not just a stadium. There's 195 housing units currently being built within phase 1 across the street. We're waiting on site plans for approximately 135 more units on one of those small blocks. It includes the Megaplex Entertainment Center. We're in conversations with Salt Lake County for a performing arts center just on the other side of phase 1. And you can see some of the development that has already happened in some of these areas. And also importantly, the future track station that will be opening by first pitch. So forgive my pun, but LHM and South Jordan are making a big swing in this area. And I just want to show you how quickly a community can change. So this is the ballpark in July. And you can kind of see it's from home plate looking southeast towards the mountains, towards Timpanogos, you can even see in the distance. And Granville Avenue is at the top, and that's where the tracks line is. We sent out our staff just this last week to take another shot. And it's incredible how quickly this changes. We recently took a tour and asked, how many workers are out here per day? On average, it's around 500 people out there working daily. One day they said they had nearly 700 people out there working daily. It is even just figuring out where to put the cranes and how to move the cranes, and it's a lot going on. In the right side of that photo, that's where that 195 units is. It will border the ballpark outfield. You can see the megaplex forming on left center field, and the grass is in. That's a blanket to keep it warm. So beyond that is a plaza and some other areas. And then again, I mentioned some of the housing units that will be coming in. With the HTRZ, there's a commitment of at least 500 affordable housing units in this smaller area of the wider station area plan. Yes.
And I'm sorry, I just don't want to forget. So with the commitment of the 500, just so curious what people are doing to, you said affordable, not deeply affordable, but how, like, are those deed restricted for a certain length of time? Just if that's a quick answer.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, so there's obviously a variety of tools that can be in place, but they would have to be deed restricted. And we're talking 60% AMI, some of those units.
Thank you so much.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. I would assume one of the, obviously the criteria for public input, and it starts very early. I would assume in this particular area that you have massive public input. Tell me about that. How many hearings? What were the numbers? Because I would anticipate this would be quite a lot of public input.
Sure. So the Daybreak area is unique in that a development agreement and zoning was put in place in 2003. So the entitlement is there. We do have the challenge sometimes in Daybreak, particularly where there's small infill pieces, that people come to public hearings and don't understand the entitlements that are already in place and the rights that the landowner has to build. We have public hearings for each of the subdivisions. We heard a lot of input from residents at that point in this particular area. Concerns, you've heard them, right? Growth brings a lot of comments and a lot of fear. And so we've been working really hard with LHM to just this past week, meeting with them on how do we provide a comfortable opening day for this ballpark and how it affects the surrounding neighborhoods and neighborhoods that will come. It's really hard to summarize how many public hearings we've actually had because we've been having them for over 2 decades.
Well, I guess my final point of that is in these public hearings, how are you addressing, I would think they'd be very positive, but there's going to be some that are not. So how are you addressing those concerns with them and how is that proceeding?
Yeah, so I think, and this has actually improved. So Daybreak was a Kennecott project. And after, I can't remember the exact date, but a handful of years ago, they sold it to an investment company. They kept some of their same staff on board, but we're really grateful now with LHM on board that we have a partnership. So when some of those questions come up, when some of those concerns come up, we can go back to the drawing board because they know that they are a long-term landowner and partner in this area. And so they want to try to address those concerns, even if the entitlement doesn't require them to, even if the zoning doesn't require them to. They recognize that they are a part of this community and need to be sensitive to those things. So again, this meeting that we held last week brought together public safety, their sports and entertainment group, their real estate group, planning, engineering, a variety of people to talk about the many aspects of what it takes to open this area to traffic and visitors and a new track station, and what we need to do to make sure those things are in place so that the concerns, because you can see at the top of this photo, there's people living in this area already, and they're concerned about people parking for game days or just not knowing what's coming. And so between the information that we've put out there and that is on LHM's website, we're trying to be sensitive to those comments.
Good question. Any other questions?
This is Mayor Ramsey. Can I just add one more comment? A shout out and a big thank you to the State Transportation Commission for approving this new track stop that will let off the red line right at the ballpark. You'll walk off the red line and just walk right onto the plaza. So anyone interested in using public transit to get to this station area and all of the amenities that will be there, our partners at UTA have been so great to work with us and with the Larry H. Miller Company to make that happen. So you won't have to go as far as the Daybreak station or the South Jordan station. This new station will let off right there, and you can get right back on right there. It really is intended to be as easy and seamless as it can be. Our partners at UDOT have been working very closely with us on things in the area with some new turnarounds and things to help people on Mountain View Corridor get in and out of this entire area. A station area plan as robust as this is exactly that. It's robust, and it takes all partners to successfully make this happen. And I just want to express my appreciation to all of those partners. This is a long process, and we have a long way to go. Grateful for people's willingness to engage and to dig in and come to recognize the vision of what this is meant to be and what it can be and why it can be a benefit to everyone in our region. And just appreciate those partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Great comment. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you for your input. Megan, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank South Jordan for the collaboration working on this plan. We're now already turning to the front runner station area plan, cruising along, and thank Stephen for the trust. You know, whenever you say we're going to do a plan for an area where there's ink on paper and dirt turning, people's eyes can bug out of their skulls. So this went really great. Our staff has reviewed the station area plan according to the requirements of state code, and we make a positive recommendation for certification or recommendation to council to certify. I'll turn it back to this group for any final comments. Motion.
Thank you, Megan. Let me just make sure we clearly understand this. It is a recommendation to forward this certification to the final authority, which will be the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and I assume that's next week. Perfect. Okay.
Second. Second.
I like it. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Recommendation of the certification before for approval. Thank you, Megan. Okay. If I can make just one comment. You heard, and I suspect by next week, 33 of these stationary plans will have now been approved. It was only a few short weeks ago we started down this journey because the legislators asked us that says, take a serious look, make the changes that are going to make some meaningful changes within our community. As a result of that policy and that law change, the cities have stepped up and we're doing what's been asked of us. So when you're communicating with our legislators, and you do communicate with the legislators, remind them that when they do put those laws out there and ask the cities and counties to step up and do what they request, we're doing it. And here's a wonderful example, okay, of how it's really making a difference. Remind them of that, because it's important they know that what they do ask, we do follow.
Chair, I agree with that. And I also think, hopefully, as local officials already know, with reality, it takes time to see the results of that legislation, which is years of time. Yeah.
Yeah, great, Commissioner. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Okay, please.
I just wanted to make a comment. A lot of this information came up. Sandy City has just approved our general plan with funding, thank you, help from Wasatch Front Regional Council over the past 2 years. And to hear that you guys have been working on this for 2 decades, it's been a long couple of years. Mayor Zoltansky and her staff has done an amazing job at getting the information out to the public and providing them opportunities to engage. We had over 120 opportunities, different meetings for the public to come in, to ask questions, to see the general plan. But within our general plan, so talking about these station area plans, we currently have 4 tracks areas that we have plans on, and then the front runner plan that we share with South Jordan. So looking forward to that and probably bringing that up with Wasatch Fronts shortly. But, just wanted to, once again, say thank you for the support with Wasatch Front Regional Council, how a lot of these items have been discussed today, how we've been incorporating them with guidance from everyone here. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Great comments. Thank you. Thank
We
you.
love to see the TLC program and its success. And the TLC program is such a wonderful partnership with Salt Lake County and with UDOT and UTA, and want to recognize that partnership.
Yeah, great comment. Thank you. Okay, let's move to item number 5, the Utah Legislative Session Overview and Federal Transportation Update. Miranda is going to give us a brief overview of the upcoming general legislation session, including relevant transportation, housing, economic development, land use, and other legislation and appropriations. Okay, Miranda is also going to touch a little bit in terms of the federal issues, notably the expiration of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So Miranda, if you kind of lead us through this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And I know we're short on time, so I'll be, as Andrew has told me today, crisp with my comments. So I'll go quite quickly, but the session is starting next week. It's coming very quickly, as it does every year. I don't know that we're ever quite ready for it to start, but nonetheless, we're off and running. I want to kind of align my comments and share a little bit about what we should be anticipating in the legislative session in terms of transportation, housing, land use, et cetera. But I also want to kind of just remind everyone what WFRC's role is up on the Hill. And I really think it falls into these three categories. WFRC acts as a technical expert to help our lawmakers up there understand more about the issues that we work with here in this space, convene our transportation partners and our local partners and local leaders, and then advocate for both appropriations and policies that advance the Wasatch Choice Vision and Utah's Unified Transportation Plan, the core of what we do here at WFRC. I'll note that there are a few legislative priority lists that are out already. Laura mentioned the governor's budget that was, I think she may have mentioned the governor's budget that was released last month. The governor also has recently released his second term strategic plan that details some specifics on housing and goals for transportation and things like that. The House and Senate Majority Caucuses have released their priorities for session and how they're going to approach things. We're still waiting to see the House and Senate Minority Caucuses priorities. But then lastly, one of our partners at the Salt Lake Chamber released their public policy priorities last week at the Utah Economic Outlook and Public Policy Summit. So we won't get into these, but I want to note that they're out there if you want to kind of see what the tone is for session, what some of these partners are looking at to do. Here's kind of my take on what the legislative landscape is for this session. First is that it's a socks and underwear year. What does that mean, right? Senator Jerry Stevenson from the Executive Appropriations Committee has said this for multiple years. It's going to be a socks and underwear year, meaning there's not a lot of money out there for new appropriations, right? There's not going to be a lot of things funded. They've said that before. They're saying it again. You know, what that really looks like, we'll see. But I will say the revenues do look maybe more slim than they have in years past. And so I think we won't anticipate seeing large amounts of things funded this year. There's a lot of new members. It was an election year, so we have a number of new legislators. And as the League of Cities and Towns would say, get to know your legislators if you haven't yet. I know we're still in that process as well, getting to know and meet some of the new members in our area. But as far as what the House and Senate have both noted is their priorities, tax cuts definitely on the table, higher education reform, housing continues to be a core issue this session. And then lastly, and more notably in years, energy is taking a big forefront of the legislative agenda this year. So that's what we can kind of expect. But I want to look back, you'll notice on that list, there wasn't transportation, right? And that's okay. And partly why is because if you look back over the last 4 years, there has been a significant, really a remarkable amount of investment into transportation over the last 4 years, over, you know, roughly, and these are approximate, there's a lot of detail behind those numbers, but roughly $5 billion over the past 4 years put into multimodal transportation, whether that's transit projects for the double tracking of Front Runner, Point of the Mountain, or just capacity for UDOT's program. So really, we've seen a lot, and now that investment is moving forward, we're utilizing that investment. And I also won't say that there won't be additional transportation investment this session, right? Both Speaker Schultz and President Adams are big transportation advocates. They're former WFRC council members. And it's likely, I would say it's likely that they continue to prioritize transportation, but we haven't seen any concrete appropriation proposals out there yet for transportation. Andrew? did
And
you have
Miranda, it's
something
worth
to add?
noting that the amounts that Miranda is showing you right now are additional one-time
Yes.
investments in transportation on top of the ongoing flow of revenue that goes into transportation. So as you noted, and Commissioner D is nodding his head, it's quite significant what has happened over the last several years. The program, the transportation investment that's happening right now in Utah is the largest that it's ever been.
Yeah, thank you for that important clarification. I also want to note a few key policy changes that have been passed in the last several years, many of which you are familiar with. First home investment zones, stationary planning, as we just heard, housing and transit reinvestment zones, local option sales tax changes, the new active transportation investment fund, which provides ongoing funding for active transportation projects throughout the state, transportation reinvestment zones. These are all kind of just some big key things that have happened, just to kind of reframe your thinking of, what might be to come. So quickly go through, really just list. We don't have time to go into the details on what to expect, but here are a few things that we're planning on that are either have bill files opened around these topics, or we anticipate bill files being open. So I'll start with transportation and note that there are 2 bills out there currently with some technical changes to HTRZs and FIZ, Housing and Transit Reinvestment Zones and First Home Investment Zones. Station area planning, I'll note that this is likely to end up in a Senator Harper bill. The idea here is that, and I'll note this because we were just talking about station area plans, is that, now that we're hitting that 5-year requirement for the reports being due, what's next as far as implementation? We found that there was kind of a hole in the statute on what is coming next. And to avoid being pulled into moderate income housing plan reporting, which can be a bit more onerous, the idea here is to have a reporting requirement at 5 years. So again, more to come, more to share on some of these, but just wanted to note that. Advanced air mobility, as our transportation system becomes more technologically advanced, and then again, local option sales taxes. I'll defer on providing explanation or detail on housing because there's so much out there. You'll note state housing plan. Laura touched on that, which she was going to do in this. Condos, Megan has been heavily involved in condo working subgroups. A lot of this comes from the Commission on Housing Affordability, but there are, a slew of housing bills already out there. I recommend that you spend some time understanding maybe what's in those and how it will impact you in your communities. But overall, there's already a lot out there. I'll just wrap up quickly. I'm not going to get into the federal update just so that we can end here on time, but I will note that next week I will provide that federal update, and we'll actually be joined at our council meeting with hopefully Congressman Moore and then newly elected Senator John Curtis to share a little bit of their perspective going into the new administration. But we'll just note on
They'll be, just to clarify,
Yes, thank
Miranda,
you.
so they're going to be in DC
Yes, sorry.
next week,
thank
but
you.
they've told us that they're planning to join us virtually, congressional schedule allowing, at our council meeting, which is next Thursday at 1:30.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I'll just note the resources that we have that we send out and share during session. Each week I'll send a weekly legislative update highlighting what happened that week up on the Hill. We have our bill tracker, which has positions proposed by staff and supported by our council and committee chairs. And then lastly, an appropriations tracker as well to kind of see how the appropriations are moving throughout the process. So I'm happy to always answer any questions if people have them, but looking forward to session starting and seeing a lot of you up there. So thank you.
Any questions for Miranda? Please.
You have been so thorough in your
updates during these sessions. I know it takes a ton of time. And is that still you who will do that, or is Johnny also, or Janae?
Yeah. So I'll still be primarily doing that. So Janae, if folks, hopefully people are aware of Janae, she's our new communications director here at WFRC. And we, do work as a team, and she's definitely helpful in helping me get this information out. But yeah, primarily Andrew and I will be the ones up on the Hill and kind of pulling together this information for everybody. So.
And maybe your point comes from the fact that while Miranda was out on maternity leave, Janae was sending those email updates out, but now Miranda's back in the saddle. And we're
Yeah,
happy
it's
about that.
intense. I mean, it's even just intense to read it because you pack it with so much great information. So thank you for that.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Miranda, thank you for the information. We look forward to everything you're going to provide to us. Obviously, it's going to be an interesting session this year. Number 6, which is the overview of the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act. As part of the Wasatch Front compliance and annual training requirement, we previously sent out a brief video on the Utah Public and Open Meetings Act in the initial RGC meeting email. For those who have already watched it, thank you. It's important that you do that. If you haven't, please take the time and make sure that you do that. We need to be compliant with the state law. Assuming there's no other business that we'd like to cover, we certainly would like to just remind you that the Wasatch Front Regional Council meeting is next Thursday. Andrew just mentioned that, and our next Regional Growth Committee meeting is scheduled now for March 20th, 25. So with that,
Two notes, schedule notes. One thing is, Miranda, we should mention, most of you know that during the legislative session, as Miranda mentioned, we do weekly legislative meetings at 8 a.m. at the Capitol on Thursdays. We're not going to do that next week because we have our council meeting also next Thursday. So rather than asking you to participate in 2 WFRC meetings, just join the council meeting if you'd like to get an update. We won't do it. So we won't do that 8 a.m. meeting the first week of the session. We do plan to do it the second week of the session. And President Adams and Speaker Schultz are planning to join us for that meeting on the 30th, Thursday the 30th. So that will be at the Capitol at 8 a.m. Okay. And Andrea?
And I just wanted to mention that we get the opportunity to host Salt Lake COG meeting, and it starts at 11:30. So if you would like to have continuing conversations with your people in this group, please do so out in the lobby.
thank you, and just good information to know.
I have one
Again,
thing
we've been
before we
well fed
close.
today. Mayor, please.
We were talking about the length of time for planning. Before I came into office, I thought, well, if someone's got a good idea, it may take a couple, 2 or 3 years to build something. But now in service for 5 years as an elected official, I have a deeper understanding of how slow and plodding, but how thoughtful the planning is and is required, especially when you're working around immovable forces like mountain ranges or already established development. Talking about the stationary plans, the first generation, I think of that was the TOD and Sandy, the transit-oriented development at our city center that started in planning in around 2010, 2015, our first construction began, and we just built out our last phase in 2024. That's 1,000 new housing units, apartment units, high quality, right next to Dimple at our city center. And that was a partnership between Sandy City, UTA, and private development. So successful, gave us a lot of lessons learned and good case studies of how those important stakeholders can come together. And now, as Councilmember Stroud mentioned, we're looking at full-blown stationary plans, and we know so much more now just in the last 10, 15 years of development. So to those people who feel like we're slogging along and never really having much to show for it, every couple of decades, there's something monumental and transformative, but there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. And I just want to encourage everybody, especially our incredible staffs. Everyone here has the backing of professionals and subject matter experts and people who have deep experience in the community. So keep going. 2025 is going to be a great year, and 2034 is going to be great for Utah. Thanks.
Great words, Mayor. Thank you. And by the way, to your point, I'm becoming more optimistic. The governor's basically saying he's looking for 40,000 residential units. certainly the comment you made adds to that, and the comments we've heard today adds to that goal, and I'm confident we're going to get there. So this is a great opportunity. And again, we learned a lot of that today, and that's really important for that. So we've been well fed. Anything else?
Yeah, Dan Doy.
Please.
Mayor Zoltansky's comment makes me hearken back to advice that Mayor Joanne Sagini used to give. I know not everybody here knows or knew Mayor Joanne Sagini. She was the longtime and much beloved mayor of Midvale City. She served in office, I don't know how long exactly, 20 years maybe. And she was very involved with WFRC and the League of Cities and Towns and so many other organizations. And Mayor Zoltansky, to your point, she used to counsel new or newer elected officials that progress comes and it takes perseverance and dedication and sometimes patience. But there's no substitute for those things. So it's wonderful. I've been in this job long enough now to hear these understandings be developed by folks, and Mayor Sagini, she would applaud what you just said if she were here. So I thought I would speak her words for her because she's not with us anymore.
Okay, well, thank you. And Mayor, thank you for your comments. They're perfect. Okay, with that then, do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Beth. Second? I think we have a second. Okay, all in favor of adjourning, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next week.